First of all, our week has been dominated by police chief search and all of those public-facing aspects of the police chief search. And a huge thank you to not only the three candidates, all of our community members, our faith community, pastors from every corner of our city that were able to meet, greet, and interact with the finalists. I appreciate the chamber and Todd Thompson and his team for getting some business and community leaders together to be able to interact with those finalists. Of course, our great officers at PPD had a chance to meet with everybody here internally. I think we counted up 6 or 8 different interactions. We really put them to work on both our internal candidate and our external candidates in the 2 days that they were here, culminating, of course, yesterday morning with the 3 formal interviews. Obviously, I have a very important decision to make, one of the most important things you can make as a mayor, if not the most important, which is the public safety of the city. We're certainly proud of the track record of what our sworn officers do out there to keep our people safe. That's what makes this decision so important. Certainly will not be an easy one, but I do have the fortune that we've got 3 really strong candidates that bring different strengths, different opportunities for improvement, but all in all, I feel like we have 3 candidates that can do the job here. And so I think at this stage, that's what you always want, is to be able to have good quality options of folks that can public safety in our city. So I anticipate a decision sometime next week. As I just mentioned, we had a lot of folks interact with these candidates. Although I've had a phone stuck to my ear, however, all last night and all this morning, obviously there's some more legwork that we're going to need to do, and potentially some follow-up questions and conversations with some of the finalists. So it's not a done process yet, but certainly the front-facing side is. So I don't want to, at this point, commit to Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, but as you guys know, common sense would tell you, if you have 1 internal candidate, 2 external candidates, this is not going to be something we're going to spend 2 months deliberating. I mean, there's going to have to be a decision forward. So more to come on an exact day, but I anticipate potentially sometime next week. On the HUD CBDG grant, obviously, it's been reported that 5.8 million of the, I think we accepted 55.6 million of HUD CDBG money in total in 2023. This grant, if you recall or go back to our conversations at that time, we had applied specifically for the Hollis T. Williams Stormwater Grant, the Friender Center Grant, and if you understand how the post HUD money works, there are specific buckets of money that are set in stone, including this. For example, this was not money we initially applied for because of the onerous nature. And I want to be very clear, not on behalf of Florida Commerce, but specifically under the previous administration, some of the federal requirements that are in place. And some examples of that are each individual home needing to have multiple environmental studies that can take 12 to 18 months. Another example of that, remember Hurricane Sally happened in 2020. If anybody repaired their house before they fully had environmental and fully received the grant, they would not be qualified. You would have to have waited. So it's now 2026. For you to qualify for this money, you will have had to have had that hole in your roof and not repaired it for that entire time. And if you repaired it, it is not a reimbursement program. And that's a federal decision. And again, these are things that we were certainly aware of at the beginning, and frankly, why we didn't actually apply for these. But there's the federal government and HUD had created for each one of these disaster recovery plans, had created a specific bucket that it was basically, would you like to accept it in this bucket, or would you like to not accept it? It wasn't, here's 5.6 million or 5.8 million, use it whichever way you think helps your community the most. It was, here are these specific prescriptions, and you can either choose to take it or choose to not take it. So this was offered to us after the fact, after we had already applied, and aggressively went after it. Thank you to Senator Bronson for us to get 25 million for Hollis T. Williams, to get 10 million for Friender Center. and to get, I'm sorry, $5 million for Fricker Center of the 10 that grant funding we received there. And then, if you recall, there's also $5 million of commercial revitalization in Brownsville and $5 million of commercial revitalization around Baptist. And to further prove that point, you guys have heard me say, the reason that the $5 million in Baptist was moved to the south side of the property is because of the onerous nature of federal grant requirements. If we had put it on the property, we'd still be waiting on a demolition probably for another year or year and a half. So we certainly are appreciative of those dollars. Florida Commerce has been wonderful, and they always are with us, working with us on not just these grants, but several other grants. And Alex Kelly and his team have been amazing. But there's just some onerous requirements that are put on these. So what is in front of council is Florida Commerce called us, and they made us aware, and I believe they just, or the county has now been made aware, I think in years past, that there have been discussions of giving an extension for these. We were made aware that there will not be an extension. So these dollars weren't cleared until mid to 2024-ish, late summer 2024, before would even have been capable to do anything. And now these individual homes would have to go through multiple environmental reviews. And another onerous aspect that we know within our own CRA programs has given a lot of pain point is you also would not be able to be allowed to pick your own contractor. So your house needs to be repaired. You would need a roof. The government will tell you who you get to use and who's going to show up on your property. As you can imagine, that causes a little bit of discomfort. And really all you have to do is you can go back and look at Hurricane Irma. I'm not sure if you guys have looked into that, but that was 2 years previous to, or 3 years previous to this. There's still houses waiting for dollars to be extended. There's been some issues with contractors charging 65% overhead on these projects because it's federal dollars. And so that being said, I certainly am proud of our team to be able to, when you think of examples like Hollis T. Williams, we are under the gun to take $55 million and get it extended in 3 years. And the great news is, thanks to Florida Commerce, is even these $5.8 million specifically geared to projects that, whether it's the port, whether it's Hollis T. Williams or otherwise, what's in front of council today, the port, are underfunded projects that these same dollars went to support. So they didn't, I mean, if they weren't collaborative and working with us, they certainly could have said, hey, well, if we're not going to meet this deadline, then send it back. So of course, the initial regret of saying, well, use them or lose them. The Commerce calls me 3 years ago and says you could use 5.8 million or you could not. Up to you. Well, of course, I'm optimistic as I am and the confidence that I have in our team, we're going to try that. The initial regret would be, well, man, we aren't able to get this off the ground as quickly as it need, given all the onerous regulations. So what we decided to do, fortunately, Florida Commerce probably, I would assume, I don't want to speculate for them, seeing the issues that are being caused further around the rest of the state with this exact same program, said, hey, look, we're not going to be able to extend the deadline. Let us help enhance some of the projects that we have already funded that also are helping folks in our community with flood mitigation, stormwater, and otherwise. So nonetheless, I'm certainly proud of our team that we soup to nuts. We're going to not only procure $55 million disaster recovery money, but all of it is going to get put in play. And that is not not an easy thing to do. It's a very hard thing to do. And that's a big testament to our team. So again, happy to take your questions. And if we can't answer technical questions, we'll certainly get Benson McDonald, our housing director, to you. The Baptist demolition, the interior demolition began this week. It'll likely be 4 to 5 months before you see any exterior demolition. Certainly want to let the public know that and that they are aware before it's visible. So most of that demolition will be taking place in there. North Star has completed asbestos removal in Tower 3, and they've begun asbestos removal in Tower 2, and they're preparing for asbestos removal in Tower 1 as we speak. In regards to protection for residents, phase 1 includes fencing, controlled work areas, and air monitoring protocols consistent with all the NDEP requirements. The work does not proceed without these measures in place, period. And I know there's can be speculation, rumors out there that is unmonitored. There is significant federal and state regulation around every aspect of this demolition. As you can imagine from my desk, when people say, well, why didn't you take the lowest bid? Well, we didn't. The reason that this is a $13 million demolition isn't for the amount of bricks, the amount of concrete. It's the amount of safety protocols and bandwidth that it takes to make sure that this is done safely. That is what causes the increased expense for a demolition of this scale. So, again, they can't be completed without those measures in place. The contractor submits required notices to FDEP, and the city ensures that no asbestos work proceeds until regulatory requirements are met. Remember, we have funded someone, an owner's rep that is there day after day to make sure that those things are being met. Initial planning date of December 22nd was identified. That the asbestos abatement did not begin until January 12th, 2026, and prior to any abatement activity, the contractor submitted a revised schedule and the required 10-day asbestos notification to FDEP. No asbestos removal started until that notice was filed, and then the required notification period was completed. We created a URL to make it easy to remember. The website formerbaptistdemolition.com will be a clearinghouse for information and updates on the project. So formerbaptistdemolition.com. So certainly encourage and would appreciate you guys to spread the word to make sure that that is all open and available to everybody. Palafox, if you haven't noticed, the construction has begun. I'm kidding. I hope you noticed. Week one, obviously complete, and utility work is limited to new water and stormwater infrastructure, and no modifications to the existing sewer lines are included in the scope of work. Sanger has had 4 shows since new Palafox has begun. They've gone off smoothly according to the operations over there, so certainly encouraged to hear that. We are receiving positive feedback with the observers visiting downtown. I think probably the most consensus feedback I've heard is it's one thing to say the sidewalks are open, but when you go down there and see it and see how much space there is, that it's not as much of a change of interaction that people might have feared. That it feels like it's still the same. If you're walking to a restaurant, parking a block away, that interaction isn't really changing, other than what you're looking at over to the left and right. So that's encouraging. I don't know if it's newsworthy. I've probably gained 1.5 pounds. I've eaten that every. I think I had 5 meals on Palafox between lunches and dinners last week. So I'm trying to do my part, which I don't know is good for my health, but certainly good for the community.
Have they found the Palafox tunnels yet?
No, but I keep following your videos.
I'm looking.
I keep zooming in.
I think you're covering them up before I get.
Yeah, so I promise you will be the first to know when we find. I'll go down there and check them out first. Then I'll let you know. But no tunnels. You'll have to ask Adrian. I'll defer to Adrian. Walk around any secret tunnels. And then all businesses, of course, remain open and accessible. So the bottom line is, we feel like number one, we certainly appreciate site utility doing what they say they're going to do, which is to come get after this thing. And I've heard that positive feedback. They've been. I've seen somebody out there every day of the week, including Sunday, getting stuff moving. So very encouraged by that. I'm encouraged by now in reality, in application, seeing that the accessibility is good. And then again, using Sanger as an example, that our hope is that we continue to move Palafox forward without a hitch, get through this between now and May 24th. Portland Loos, MLK Plaza and Skate Park open to the public on Tuesday, so those are up, operational, ready to go. So very glad to finally have a bathroom at the skate park, and more to come on. You guys, I know, I'm asking. We've got 2 more, and we talked about BMP. I know we did look into BMP because of the grant requirements. We can't reimburse one that's already been purchased. That doesn't preclude us from buying a third and putting it in BMP. So we'll still look into that. But what that means for us is we do have 2 more to put in. And I still, at this point, I know we've started the preliminary research into Seville Square because of all of the nature of the festivals and trying to help our nonprofits that do business. They've got to rent porta potties, bring them in and bring them out. If there's some way that a high use park like Seville, we can take some of the financial burden off of our nonprofits and truly economic development drivers. You think of Arts Fest and Seafood Fest and many of those festivals down there. If we can make that a little easier on folks, and I certainly think that a more permanent structure like this is probably a little more welcomed than a temporary porta potty situation. So not only should it help our awesome nonprofits and organizations that put on events there, but hopefully that it would be a better experience for our residents and our visitors as well. So, so we're looking into that. No guarantees on that. We'll be putting both there because of the volume of people when we only do one. So our team's looking into that. But if we are going, the update for you is if we are going to add one to BMP, we would use some of those grant dollars to buy a third one. It would not be a reimbursement of one that we already have, which would be no problem. Certainly they're available, and that there should be no logistical issue there. E-bikes, yeah, I did post something about this, kind of garnering feedback on social media. I know there was, obviously, you guys may be aware or may have reported on an incident with a youth on an e-bike in Cordova Park. This has been a bubbling conversation. I believe I expect it to be a conversation in the Florida legislature. But when you think about, especially these class 3 e-bikes that go 28 miles an hour, at some point, what's the difference between that and a slow motorcycle or a dirt bike? And if you had a dirt bike on the road, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So just because there's fenders that look like a dirt bike or a motorcycle doesn't make that. Technology has now clouded our judgment between something that moves at 30 miles an hour, close to 30 miles an hour, and something that we would all agree would need to have a license plate, a license to know the rules of the road. So, so we're gathering feedback. I've started the conversation with the city attorney about what I do know that we have the purview to put some regulation in. And again, I would say personally, what we would bring to council, obviously, it would be an ordinance council would have to approve it, get their feedback, of course. But at this moment, I certainly am focused on specifically class 3 e-bikes, the ones that go 28 miles an hour and sometimes modified even faster, and potentially looking at, as other cities in Florida have done, putting a requirement that you would have to at least have a learner's permit. And the argument being, if you've been given a learner's permit for driving, you at least have a basic understanding of the rules of the road, and that an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old wouldn't have. So more to come on that. We obviously don't have a deadline. We've got to talk to our police department about what's enforceable, all of those things. But given that incident and so many incidents that have happened here in this county, neighboring counties all over the state of Florida, something has to be done. And we can't continue to pretend that because it looks like it operates like a manual bike. It doesn't. It moves the same speed. And whether that's conversations about golf carts, I know that has come up. Whether that's certainly those are going to be things we're going to examine across the board about if there needs to be any specific regulation. We are not here to be regulators of fun, but we're here to be. But job number one is public safety. Period. And we will not put fun for an old. I have an 11-year-old. I'm not going to put fun for an 11-year-old over keeping drivers and keeping the kids in this community safe. So we'll take a hard look at that. More to come. I can't give you an exact date yet, but the goal would be to bring points forward to council for discussion to have some better regulation on that. Recycling update. I told you I had a lot. Recycling update. Mailers went out on January 5th to another mailer to invite folks. So we've eclipsed the 4,000 household number since July. So in order joining daily. Good news, we continue since day one to hold that 7% contamination rate. There has been some conversation, you guys may be aware, about Summit Boulevard. And so if you were to watch the bell curve of Summit Boulevard, it was about 90 to 100% contaminated when we had mandatory recycling. Any given pickup was basically fully trash because everybody had a recycling bin. Anybody who cared to recycle was just doing it at their curb, and anybody who needed to drop off a living room set was doing that at Summit. So what happened? Well, when we paused curbside recycling, actually the contamination rate went way down because many people who care very much about recycling, not having the convenient access, went to the Summit garage and did their best to recycle. So there was still some contamination, but it went down significantly. Well, lo and behold, we have 4,000 people who have signed up, opted in to recycle from their curb. You can safely assume that those are the people who do definitely care about recycling. And the bell curve has gone back up, and we, at this moment, are at 85 to 90% contamination at Summit. So what does that mean in practice? It means everything that's going to Summit Boulevard is getting thrown in the dump. And so the city is saying, here's where you recycle. Yet it's ultimately just a dumping station for, and by the way, I don't even want to say city residents. Oftentimes people who don't live in the city are looking for a place to not have to pay to go, take furniture and things like that. So This places service 4 days a week where it's, I don't know if you guys, again, how much you paid attention to it. We'll get dinged on it. Somebody will put a photo up and say it hasn't been picked up, just so you know. We pick up 4 days a week there. And so the math on that, it's 6 days a week between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So only Sundays was the only day that we weren't picking up. So if you think about it that way, when you saw a photo of all of that, that meant it happened in one day. Where garbage or cardboard was all surrounded. It wasn't because we weren't picking it up, which is the presumption. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we were picking up 6 days a week. So just so you know, 218 scheduled cleanups by a 5-person crew, 3 to 4 hours. If you include periodic investment or unscheduled visits, like seeing that it was overflowing and having to go back out there, for example, this site costs about $260,000 a year to operate. So you guys can do the math. We have 90% contamination, ultimately a second dumpster, third dumpster, and it's costing our citizens almost $300,000 a year. So if I were to come to this podium and say, we're going to raise the bill $1 or $1.50, there'd be a lot of conversation. If you do that math with 21,000 households, that is $1 or $1.50 to 21,000 households that we're spending on ultimately a contaminated dumping ground. So what does that mean for us? Well, we're looking at options. We asked our sanitation team to analyze what might be best. We're going to further analyze the ability to potentially move a recycling drop-off to the transfer station. If you recall, when we didn't have mandatory recycling, during that pause, we did the assisted drop-off. It just allows us to secure it better. And that we have fencing there. We can have hours there that we can have it open. Because as you can imagine, when does the contamination happen? It happens because it's unassisted. Nobody's there. There's no fence. It's in the middle of the night. And it's very difficult to control. So someone will ask, well, why wouldn't you put a fence around the one at Summit? That is airport property. When you start building permanent things on airport property, if you look to the left and to the right of the dumping station there, the recycling area, there is nothing built there, and that's for a reason, because that is where planes fly over. And so when you start getting into FAA permanence of building fences or a little watch station or things like that, it certainly does become complicated. So the initial review from our sanitation department, if we were to move it to Leonard and Palafox Street at the transfer station, it could be managed by one employee, minimal equipment. Under that model, we think we can actually reduce the cost by about 90% so far, $30,000 a year versus $258,000 a year. Why does that matter to a citizen? Because if we're talking about trying to balance and make sure that your sanitation bill isn't going up, I would think that if we can accomplish the same goal and do it for 90% less cost, that's something we need to entertain. So we have not finalized that decision. We're just in this analysis phase of what's the cost benefit. We know it's something that people are very much used to having at that location. We continue to pursue if we thought that there's a fence solution there. We don't think there is, but we have looked at that. And again, more to come, but again, something that's been there a long time that really isn't working. If we can find a way to make it work and still offer that to folks, that if they don't want to pay for curbside, but they still want to recycle, they'd still have a way to do it. And really actually a more centralized location in our city, if you really look at the map. So again, more to come on that. That is not a final decision. Just wanted to let folks know that certainly we're aware of that. We have seen that bubbling up, and that we want to do the best that we can. Let's see, a couple more things. Parade route changes. I certainly want to remind everybody of that. MLK parade that's coming up on Monday will be that down South Jefferson. Ultimately, is the best way to describe it for folks that don't know street names and street grids off the top of their head. Ultimately, that same section that would go down Palafox starting in Vinyl is going to go over to Garden and then down Jefferson Street. So a pretty similar traffic flow, other than just moving one block to the east. So make sure everybody is aware of that. And that is finally everything that I've got. Happy to take your questions.
Mayor, you told us that the Florida Chamber informed the city that there wasn't Florida Commerce informed the city that you wouldn't be able to meet that deadline. We heard from city staff, a few members this week, that said, one said we didn't have the right people in the right seats. Another hinted at personnel issues. Can you elaborate on why the city didn't meet that deadline?
So to your first question, Florida Commerce came to us. We certainly would or could have the ability to say, well, give us this shot. And historically, extensions have been granted for many HUD CDBG projects, not just this bucket, but many, whether it's DR or other type of HUD CDBG money. Because why? Why do these extensions exist? Because federal money is very onerous. With the news that there's not going to be an extension, and by the way, again, I don't suspect that's a City of Pensacola decision. I believe the county is aware that at this moment and very recently that they will also not be getting an extension. I'm not sure where they are with their program or any of that. Certainly, you'd have to ask them. But I think many people around the state are being notified that there's going to be extensions on these particular buckets of money. And again, these are dollars that were put forth certainly during a different federal administration that might have a little bit of extra red tape. In terms of, I can't speak to specific city staff members. I'm not sure who said what on that front or what their opinions are. I was there when the grants came in. We did not initially apply for this grant for these onerous reasons because of in fear of taking money that we couldn't get out the door because of federal requirements. And by the way, that happens many times in our office. Any preconceived notion that the City of Pensacola applies for every single grant that hits our inbox, would be falsehood, right? Why would we not? And I can speak to this because we've never taken in more grant money in the city ever in any administration that we have here. So there's no bigger fan of grant money and getting after it than me. And maybe in this particular case, overly aggressive to try to get as much grant money in the city as we can. But we look at those things and we pass on certain requirements because if it's a deadline we can't meet, or it's something we feel like we won't really qualify for, or it takes us down, it's a bandwidth issue, whatever the case may be, we try to make that decision. So I'm very appreciative of Florida Commerce calling us back after we had put out the initial grant and saying, hey, we've got this other money that nobody applied for. And remember, this money that came in was only for Escambia and Santa Rosa County because it's Hurricane Sally. So this isn't statewide competitive money. And that's how the storm DR disaster recovery funds work. I don't think it was a coincidence that no one had applied for those dollars initially, and that ultimately they're in the bucket. And smartly, Florida Commerce says, hey, the money's there. Do you want to take it or do you not want to take it? So what I can say is we certainly at the city, we're going to put out $55 million in 3 years of federal money, which I certainly could not be more grateful to our staff to be able to do that. That is not easy to do. And fortunately, Florida Commerce, knowing the issues that cities around the state of Florida are having to get these dollars out, were willing to come and say, hey, we would like you to be able to reallocate these dollars to other projects that we also funded in disaster recovery. So it isn't sending it back. It's not that citizens aren't going to get a benefit, but our road and rail is at the port, which is coming up. It has been years in the making for me, and that's not for one vendor or one. If we want trains to move and we want cars to drive on port, that's pretty important for our economic development, for job creation, for everything else for our citizens. Hollis T. Williams, the largest stormwater project in the history of the city, I think would be pretty important from a flood mitigation standpoint in protecting people's homes in just in a different way. So I certainly always appreciate the collaboration with Florida Commerce that willing to let us use these dollars and not just send them back because it was too onerous in this one particular program, and be able to put them to work and help our citizens.
What was the money intended for? What you keep talking about buckets, but what's the bucket?
The bucket is the Hurricane Sally. I'll have to get the exact terminology, but ultimately it's home repair. It's HUD CDBG-DR, which is disaster recovery, and then there's infrastructure buckets. There's home repair buckets.
Right.
There are 3 or 4
So
different
this is
ones.
home repair.
Correct. That's correct.
That people do, yeah.
Now, with the houses, you mentioned that these have to be houses that have not been touched or repaired since Hurricane Sally.
That's correct.
They'll have to pick the federal government will have to pick a contractor. Does the city feel like there's not that many houses that really are in that?
Well,
condition?
I wouldn't want any determination of where we are today wasn't because we're going to say, listen, I think in every city there's going to be different aspects of dollars that we would be able to do something that improves someone. And also bear in mind, we have programs like this already. I mean, we have very similar programs like this that aren't tied to Hurricane Sally, which is this one bucket that's being discussed publicly now. We have, we can give you numbers that have, maybe it's 18 houses. I can get you exact numbers that we've already been doing, in essence, this exact same thing. Well, it's a little bit different. Not all of them are under the same tight timeline. Not all of them require multiple environmental reviews. Not all of them require that someone sit with a hole in their house for 6 years and not touch it until we show up. Well, it's 2026 right now. We weren't even allowed to press go on anything until July, August-ish of 2024. Environmental reviews at each individual house. I would love if they would just do an environmental review for the city that would then have got us verified, and then off we go, right? We could start attempting to make repairs. But that isn't how it's going to work. Each lot, your house would get a 12, 18-month environmental review. Your house would get a 12, 18, that's how we would have to do it. So that isn't to say, and I'm not saying that we wouldn't have been able to get some of those dollars out, but Florida Commerce, that is doing this exact hurricane program all over the state of Florida, has certainly better perspective than we do. And, certainly what I've seen so far is certainly treating the city of Pensacola in some silo as if we're an outlier to this program. I would recommend, again, go look at the process in Hurricane Irma and see how, but that's 2017 and there's still houses waiting. I don't know what their deadlines were or what they were in 2017, ours for 2020, but it's just a difficult program to execute. And again, certainly this is federal administration. I know because we met with them directly in Washington, D.C., that they've been very, both from an EPA standpoint and a HUD standpoint, trying to cut through some of this red tape that makes these things pretty difficult. But again, I would certainly suggest anybody reporting on it go not just look at City of Pensacola in this particular program in a silo and see what the general performance of the state has been. And I'm not going to speak for them, but I have a feeling that's why they might have called us, is to say, yes, you have until 2027, but we know how long this is taking. And we know that there's not going to be an extension. So help us help you. Let us reallocate these dollars to also disaster recover on other projects and get them.
Mayor, it sounds a couple questions on this. I guess it sounds like the way you describe the grant is people who would qualify this would essentially not really have any other way to repair their homes after Sally. So did the city do any, has the city done any analysis for how many, it's kind of Tanner's question, how many homes would actually qualify for this right now? The Escambia County told me that they have already, from their previous home repair programs that are similar to the city's, just from people who apply for those, they've identified their allocation of 75% of their $9 million that they got is going to be, when they get the contractors in, already spent from this grant. So has the city done any of that kind of work to see how many houses, how many homes are out there?
Yeah, well, again, with any of the verification processes that would take place with those dollars, certainly, and I would defer you to the housing department. Again, I think numbers are here. Similar projects, again, we had 12 skip rehabilitation projects, fiscal 24-25, for about 400,000, 6 ARPA rehabilitation projects for about 100,000. So just clarify, this is not the only money that's going towards rehabilitation of homes. Those are under different programs with different guidelines. Also, you can certainly ask the county. I don't operate the county. What we believe tilted recently is that there's not going to be an extension. And the assumption for many dollars in many projects, including some of ours, our other DR projects, is that extensions are going to be given. So all I would say is and listen, that's amazing. I hope every single dollar can be spent for disaster recovery in any way that you can maximize. That's certainly what we're trying to do. But if they're able to do that without the extension, and that's awesome. Certainly applaud that effort. But what I know is both the county and us were just made aware that there is going to be an extension. So that might change trajectory of certain things. I can't speak for the county, and no way would I. But I think that is new news to both the county and us.
But I do think it's a fair question, is how many homes could have been repaired with that money? It would seem that y'all would already, you've had the money since 2024. You'd have some sort of list of some homes you were already looking at to do this with.
Right. So we have lists, and we have waiting lists for the general repair, whether it's within CRAs, ones that we can use SHIP funds on. And why I point that out is, again, number one, when it says the city doesn't want repair houses, we are repairing houses. This is one particular avenue of funding to repair houses. This is not the be all end all of how home repair. We did 18 last year. So in the city with other funds that aren't as onerous. So that wasn't reported. So I just want to be clear on that there is home repair taking place in the city of Pensacola in programs, as we said, with lists. But what is different is you have to prove, and again, if you do research and look at around the state, one of the biggest hangups was not only that you aren't allowed to fix it until the money shows up. That was one of the big ones. But also you have to prove that it came from Hurricane Sally. And nobody can speak to that better than the city of Pensacola. We have a port that's broken that FEMA won't fix. We have a wayside park that's broken that FEMA won't fix because we didn't take a photo 24 hours before the hurricane. I wasn't here. So here's what I can tell you. I wasn't here in 2020 when the hurricane took place or what inventory of homes took place. But we do have lists of home repair. I would have to get with our housing team if we have specific lists of home repair that can prove that it happened during Hurricane Sally and that they can prove that they haven't touched their house until money shows up. I'm going to speculate and say that's a very small list, but certainly I'm happy to defer that to our housing department and get you whatever list that we have. If that was part of the application process or part of the verification process, which it certainly could have been, I would not be in those weeds necessarily, but our team would be, and happy to share it.
Do you have any idea what the waiting list of people waiting for repairs?
Depends on what list it is.
Well,
right. So, for example, specific within CRAs, for example, I believe the East Side CRA, this is just off memory, the East Side CRA is a very long list. Why? Because there's no funding in the CRA.
Right.
Versus the West Side has a little more funding in it. It might be a shorter list. So it just depends on which list you're talking about. But none of those lists have a 2027 deadline where you have to prove it was a hurricane and you can't have touched your house for 6 years. None of those have that.
And Mayor, that's what I was trying to ask about, because the city does have all these other home repair programs that are very limited in funding, and there's wait lists. I believe is the East Side CRA, they aren't even taking applications right now because the wait list is so long and funding is so limited. So if the city was able to identify homes that may qualify for this funds, it seems like it would free up other dollars to use for that. So I guess that's my main question. And then the other question is, has the city looked at, because the county's further along in their process, trying to partner with them because I believe they have a solicitation out right now for contractors, to qualify contractors under the grant. Is there any, that was what the city council members were talking about.
Yeah.
Are there any?
Yes, we've had initial conversations with that. The indication from Commerce is that is not going to be feasible. But again, not of some issue caused by us or our staff or anything like that, just back to the onerous nature of it and the deadline window extension, I think causes that. The list of homes, anybody can get on a list of homes. And again, and that's what I'm trying to illustrate here. I don't mean to continue to repeat myself, but there's one thing to say, I have a home in the East Side where my porch is falling in or my roof has a hole in it from a tree. That's one thing. And a significantly more common thing than I have a hole in my house since 2020 that I've not repaired because I will wait on these dollars, and I can prove that it came from Sally from our insurance adjuster, and I'll wait 18 months on a environmental. There's just less homes like that. Now, specific to the East Side, let's talk bigger picture. The East Side CRA has very minimal funding for any project. So to have it framed as, well, East Side doesn't give a lot of money or the wait list is ended, whether it's Cobb Center, we're spending $1.7 million to restore Cobb Center. You know how much East Side CRA is putting into that? Zero, because there isn't any money in East Side CRA. We have to go find that other places. That's no fault of East Side CRA. It's just the way, the small size and where it is, and the property tax makeup of that area just will never allow long term for that to grow unless the CRA itself grows geographically. So I just want to make sure that folks listening hear that and not pigeonhole into, well, the East Side area has this long list as if we're refusing to fund that. There's a lack of funding in the East Side area for any activity to take place. So yes, the list is going to be longer in a CRA location where there is no funding versus if you live in the West Side or if you live in the urban core where there is no funding to be able to help with this project. So, but again, happy to get you those lists for those particular projects. But I'm just here to delineate the difference between a federally red-taped hurricane-based project and your normal annual SHIP and in one case ARPA funding for us to restore houses that we are actively doing right now in the city.
Yeah, and I guess is there any analysis being done though to see any of those would qualify for this, even with the onerous requirements?
Again, I would have to defer that to the housing department, but we're happy to get you. I think Amy Miller has those answers for you, so we'll get those to you.
Last question on this for me, Mayor. Councilman Bear argued earlier this week that the city could still try and meet this deadline by 2027 before this grant expires. So where does the city stand on this discussion? Are you moving forward? What do you expect to hear from the council?
Well, if you're asking me whether I'm going to take the advice of Councilman Bear and say, well, we have time to do this, or take the advice of Florida Commerce, who is administering these all over the state, and saying that we need to reallocate this. Obviously, as you can imagine, I'm going to probably take the expertise of the folks that are the ones, quite literally, as the pass-through administering these dollars federally. So again, we didn't call them. They didn't call us upset or, hey, you didn't spend it. I think they're seeing the pattern around the state of Florida that this is going to be difficult. They know that there's not going to be an extension given, and they want to help the city. They're saying, hey, these are all disaster recovery dollars. We didn't create the bucket. The city of Pensacola and the county and Santa Rosa County didn't say, please give us this bucket of these dollars. That those are predetermined buckets of dollars that came in. Some have different regulations than others. Some are easier to attain than others. So again, so we're always going to do our best to try to bring dollars in to help folks in this community, period. We're always going to do that. But there's grants that are easier to execute. There's ones that are harder to execute. There's ones we don't even apply for because of our ability to not be in a situation like this where it gives off the perception that this is something that we proactively went out and said, oh, well, this is our idea that we want to do this, as if we didn't execute. We have lots of things to execute in the city. We are going to execute $55 million of disaster recovery money for our community, including these $5.8 million, hopefully. And that's just where we are. So, but our work on houses in our city has not and does not stop. This is just one particular bucket of money with one particular set of onerous rules that is significantly different than the day-to-day work that we're doing in our community. When you think about things like we just got rated 96% for our Section 8. We do the Section 8 in all of the county. We just got the 96% grade. Certainly, Benzie being new and having to jump in and adapt to lots of different things in housing. Very difficult department, very complex department. Certainly proud of that. So, again, it's easy for council members or the media to silo in on one thing as if we're sitting on our hands and we're doing nothing else.
We're not saying that. That's not what we're doing, man. We just want to see. We want to see. I think what all of us are trying to figure out is someone who could have benefited this is not going to be able to benefit from it, and if there's another way to help. I mean, that's one question. And I guess the other thing in that last bit that you said is that you're saying that this is something Florida Commerce recommended. Do you find another use for this money? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is we didn't call Florida Commerce saying we want to find another use for this money. And again, I think some credence needs to be, whether it's Councilman Bear or anyone, needs to understand that these are the pass-through administrators of these dollars. In other words, they probably have a pretty good indicator, certainly better than a mayor in one city or an administrator in one county is going to have on on the trajectory of those dollars and being able to get them spent, plus the perspective of other parts of the state. And so that is certainly what piqued our interest, understanding, conversation, collaboration with Florida Commerce. And it wasn't because we just decided that it's something that we don't want to do. If we know an extension's not coming, we know the onerous rules around it, then we're going to try to deploy these dollars into the city the best way that we can at this point.
Mayor, is the port project that's related to this, I guess, is it, if the council approves the idea of the 2.3 million, does that, with that, is Florida Commerce said, then I'm gonna be good at math here, the remaining 3 or so million is also off the table for home repair, or could you do the 2.3 million towards the port and then the 3 million could still be used for home repair if you somehow find a homeowner would somehow qualify and you could get the bid done and all that?
At the council's request, we certainly looked into that. We were not optimistic about that based on the initial conversations. And again, I think something not necessarily media or community that might get lost between council and staff is, we've had dozens and dozens and dozens of conversations with Florida Commerce about many issues. Our staff and them are, first name basis around projects, whether it's American Magic that they help fund through Job Growth Grant Fund or anything else. So we have constant interaction. And again, they're great partners. So, obviously, again, we're taking the temperature of what they're seeing around the state, knowing that there is an extension. So we are certainly not optimistic of that. Because of that request, we can further inquire. But whether it's 3 million or whether it's 5 million, I don't know that that changes the onerous nature of the program. So we will have to see, but certainly I think the conversation is moving towards whether it could be, again, reallocated, and to be clear, reallocated to other disaster recovery projects. This is not, here's 5.8 million, go spend it on anything you want. It would have to go to those other buckets. And again, 55 million deployed in 3 years of federal money. I need to buy ribbons for some in our staff around here to even get that done on any type of project that has HUD federal regulations on it. So we're proud of that. And if that discussion were to be, you have to reallocate it. What we know for a fact would be, if it can't be, if we're exhausted on options, anything with housing or some modified version of housing, then it would go to Port or Hollis T. Williams, and that's why this port one's coming forward, because the road and rail restoration project was a disaster recovery infrastructure project. So it is not take it and go spend it on anything you want. It's take it and spend it on another Sally CBDG-DR project that's in the Loos. Anything else?
Mayor, on the just different topic,
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. On the e-bikes thing, could you give us some insight on the incident you referred to? I haven't seen that reported anywhere.
Yeah, I would defer, not just to make sure I'm not saying information that we don't need to be sharing. I'll defer to Mike Wood or Chief Brown, or we'll have Chief Brown stick around after and give you what information that we can. What I can say is certainly an incident involving a youth in the Cordova Park area where that caused injury. And again, I want to be clear that this is not in reaction to one incident. This is in reaction to, and you guys have reported on, I think there was an incident on Highway 29 in the county maybe several months back with somebody driving the wrong way on an e-bike. So this is not foreign. And I don't know the bill offhand, but I've already heard, it may already be in, that Florida legislature is going to take this on in some way. Whatever information we can give you, we will give you. I'm happy to, or have the police department give you what they can say, what they can release. So I just want to be, I'm not trying to not give you that information. I just want to be careful with minors involved and things like that. We can't say. But the point remains, we have to do something. We cannot sit idly by and have the ability for, and I'm not saying, to be honest with you, I don't even know the exact age of the person that we're discussing here. So it's not about that, but we cannot have 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds that know no rules of the road be on the road on something to do 30 miles an hour. I mean, and I think that's pretty basic common sense. And so we've got to do something. And again, I've certainly notified our city attorney's office to start that ball rolling and get their feedback, get PPD's feedback on what's enforceable. I have seen other cities in Florida. One example, they're actually trying to take on class 1 and 2, the ones that go up to 20 miles an hour, where they would require a student ID. Obviously, there's some hesitation with that. Does it have your age on it, date of birth? I mean, that, so that's what we're trying to balance. It's got to be something that's enforceable. And I think we start at the top of the pyramid, which is the ones that are moving the fastest that can cause the most danger and are the heaviest. So the ones that go 30 miles an hour can weigh 70 pounds. So when you hit a car or a car hits you, then it's really not only speed, it's weight. And so that's where my primary focus is. But I do know that we've been looking at some things with other motorized non-cars, like golf carts. I think that there's been some stuff moving around the city attorney's office on that already. So I expect that we'll probably kind of merge those efforts and just make sure that e-bikes are within that as well.
So these aren't rental e-bikes; they're personal.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Right now, there's no regulation. I mean, nothing
Yeah.
stops a 12-year-old from driving down any city. But this is that classic case where technology is starting to outpace regulation. And again, I'm not the regulator of fun. I like having fun as much as the next person, but technology is now outpacing public safety in this particular case, in my opinion. So we got to catch up. We got to come back with something to make sure that our kids are safe.
Do you have any idea of like a timeline of when you might have a proposal?
No, I'll have to see how far in we are. The good news is, because we've been working on this with other motorized, non-car type of vehicles, I bet we've got some general legwork already kind of further ahead, not just starting with a blank Word document, but that we'll be able to merge a lot of these same things into. Where the time will be spent is making sure. I certainly will not bring an ordinance forward to our council for approval if the police department isn't signed off on it. They're the ones that we ultimately have to be enforcing. So I think step one is get something on paper to then circulate amongst enforcement and everything else, then get that to council. Obviously, we take a couple of meetings. And when I say get to council, certainly that's why we meet with council, is to get council's feedback ahead of that, make sure that those needs are, that if they have any ideas or insight, we certainly welcome those. That's their job, boots on the ground in these specific neighborhoods. They probably have even deeper insight into maybe specific issues with these that at the city level we may not see. So we plan on familiarizing with police department, familiarizing with council, and then getting something forward. So that's my long way of saying no, I don't have an exact date, but the good news is it probably would move faster than just a general idea starting from scratch, because our city attorney's office is already working on something relatively similar.
Mayor, I got a question from the newsroom on the Summit Boulevard. It's trash cleanup.
Yes.
So a recent comment maybe you made on Facebook, I don't know, about some kind of cleanup actually happening in the city. Can you tell me about this?
Yeah, actually, I think it was along the lines of what I just said earlier. I think I just was like, hey, mentioning that it's extremely contaminated, and we have to look at whether it's viable. And again, it's one thing, obviously, like with anything, and certainly my administration has experienced many times, trying to do what we think is the right thing, and maybe it'll be popular to keep it there because it's always been there, right? And we know that, and that's the easy thing to do. But I bet if we ask the citizens to say, would you like to keep it there and pay $1.50 per month on your bill or not, which, by the way, please don't report that. I'm proposing that. I'm not. I'm just giving you the example. But in essence, that is the cost. $280,000 divided by 21,000 households is about that. And so, $10-ish, $15 a year, right, per household. Whether you use it or not, or you live on Creighton, or you live on, you live in Sanders Beach, and you're nowhere near it, doesn't matter. That's across the city. So I bet if we said, would you like that location or everybody pay $1.50, I think I know the answer to that. But if you look at it just as taking something away, then you can kind of know what to expect there. So we don't want to just take something away. We want to come back with something viable. And so that it's just kind of floating out to you guys in the media and the public. This is what we know. We know that one costs $280,000 one costs $30,000. I mean, obviously, we're going to further investigate that and try to come up with something. We can lock that fence at the transfer station, so we're not getting litter sets in the night, or having people drive over. Quite literally, documented cases of where, at least from our sanitation folks, seeing, you know, Alabama license plates or other county license plates showing up over there saying, "Great, we've got the perfect place to drop the stuff that I don't want to pay to go get dumped." So anyway, and I'm encouraged by the recycling. We're over 4,000 now and counting. Continue to see that grow. Continuing to see it 93%. So it isn't as if we aren't offering a viable alternative. But I think we have all of our bases covered if we continue to offer curbside, if that's what you want to do. It's super convenient. But if you don't want to pay the extra few bucks and you want to be able to drive it, we still give you the opportunity for that. I just don't see why all of the taxpayers of the city, who are all required to have garbage, why they should have to be footing the bill for something that's ultimately a dumping grounds for people who may not even live here. So that's where we're at with it. And again, that same thing as the last topic. No, we don't have a hard and fast deadline yet. No, we're going to move it. We'll certainly narrate that to folks. If we make that call, we'll say June 1st or July, whatever the case may be. So we'll give everybody advance notice to know that it's moving. Certainly, again, appreciate y'all's help.
Are the cameras out there not really doing anything? I know that Mayor Robinson, when they installed those cameras, he actually did one of his weekly press conferences out there. So are they able to catch anyone dumping?
I was going to ask Mayor Robinson to go out there. He lives in the neighborhood. Yeah, that's his walking path over there, I think. See if you can keep an eye on it. Listen, cameras are great, but I think it's safe to say I don't know that camera's tied into the real-time crime center. So we probably do have a lot of footage of people from other states dropping off living room furniture, but as you can imagine, in the grand scheme of public safety, that's probably not necessarily our highest priority. Obviously, if a crime is committed or things like that. So yes, there's some technology, but there's not enough response. I mean, for someone to drop off a couch in 30 seconds and leave, I don't know that I'm going to take our feet off the street, to go handle that issue. As you can imagine, there's certain priorities. So, and that's because it's just a broken system. It's nice to have a camera there, but that's not a sustainable solution. A sustainable solution would be either a manned location where somebody is physically there, and when it closes, then you close the gates and you can't get in there. That's what we're trying to get to. It's an actual long term, not just have a video camera of somebody's license plate as they leave with their 90% dropped off. So, yeah.
Mayor, recycling is a different angle here. Before Christmas, you had mentioned that you were sort of beta testing, or getting ready to beta test the AI bailouts. Have you started that? And do you think that's contributing to the contamination rates improving?
I believe we have, and I can get Amy to get you the exact update of how many weeks. Yeah, I don't know up to the minute how many weeks it's been on and all that. I do know I was briefed that there were some complications getting on the trucks initially, and then I think it is in testing. But honestly, at this point, no, because it's been 93% since we started, which is a great thing, But we also haven't been sending notices to the door. So what'll be interesting is it's going to be hard to improve on 93%, but it'll be interesting to see if we can even take that number up a little bit more now that we know we have oil recyclers, right? Because they've had to pay a couple extra dollars to do it. Plus, they've already doing a really good job. There's certain neighborhoods like East Hill that are like 100% clean, like almost 100% clean, which is awesome. So some neighborhoods a little better than others, but if we can improve on 93% is an A, if we can make it an A+, then because of the technology, certainly that would be a great thing. Anything else? Thank you.